You laugh roughly 17 times a day. You don't decide to do it. It happens before you've even finished processing why something was funny. A sound escapes your body, half breath, half bark, and you don't know where it came from. Here's the strange part. You were doing this before you could speak. Before you could form a single word, before you understood a single joke, you were already laughing. And that timing isn't an accident. It's the biggest clue we have to what laughter actually is. For most of the last century, scientists treated laughter like a footnote to humor. Something funny happens, you laugh, end of story. But that explanation falls apart the moment you look closely, because most laughter has nothing to do with jokes at all. In the late 1990s, neuroscientist Robert Praveen did something almost nobody had done before. He left the lab and went to shopping malls, sidewalks, and college campuses with a notebook, and he simply listened. He recorded over 1,200 instances of laughter in natural conversation, then went back and analyzed exactly what triggered each one. What he found overturned the assumption everyone had been working from. Only about 10 to 20% of laughter followed anything resembling a joke. The rest came after ordinary sentences. "I'll see you later. It was nice meeting you." Statements with no comedic content whatsoever, followed by laughter anyway. Praveen's conclusion was blunt. Laughter isn't primarily a response to humor. It's a social signal, and it's happening constantly, underneath conversations, mostly ignored, doing something far older than comedy. So, if laughter isn't about jokes, what is it about? To answer that, you have to go back further than language. Further than tools, further than fire. In 2009, primatologists Marina de Villa-Ross and Michael Owen recorded the vocalizations of chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and bonobos during play fighting, tickling, and chasing. What they found was a sound remarkably close to human laughter, breathy, rhythmic, produced during physical play between individuals who trusted each other enough to wrestle without real aggression. Using this data, they built an evolutionary tree tracing laughter back through every great ape species. The math pointed to something specific: laughter confinement. Laughter is at least 10 to 16 million years old. That places its origin long before spoken language, which most researchers date to somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 years ago. Laughter isn't a byproduct of language. Language showed up millions of years after laughter already existed. This raises an obvious question. What was laughter doing for 10 million years before there were any jokes to laugh at? The answer starts with play. Watch juvenile chimpanzees wrestling, and you'll see something that looks almost like human children roughhousing. One chimp play bites another. The other could interpret that as an attack, and in a world without language, that misunderstanding could be lethal. But instead, both animals produce a specific panting vocalization throughout the encounter, and that sound functions as a real-time signal. This is play. This is not a threat. Do not escalate. Primatologists call this a meta-communicative signal, a signal about the nature of the interaction itself, not about any specific event within it. Laughter, in its earliest form, wasn't a reaction to something funny. It was a running broadcast of safety during a risky physical encounter, and that explains something about human laughter that's easy to miss. Watch children on a playground, and you'll notice they laugh most intensely not during calm moments, but during exactly the kind of activity that could tip into real danger: chasing, tickling, mock fighting, being thrown into the air and caught. The laughter isn't decoration. It's doing the same job it did 10 million years ago, telling every participant in real time that the danger is fake. But laughter didn't stay confined to physical play. Somewhere along the evolutionary timeline, it expanded to cover a second kind of risk: social risk. In 2017, psychologist Sophie Scott at University College London used brain imaging to study what happens when people hear laughter. She found something the joke response theory never predicted. Laughter is more contagious than almost any other human sound. When subjects heard genuine laughter, regions of their premotor cortex, the part of the brain responsible for preparing physical movement, activated automatically, as if their bodies were already getting ready to laugh in response before they'd consciously decided to. Scott described laughter as functioning less like a reaction and more like an instrument for building instant group cohesion. It spreads through a room the way a yawn does, but faster, and it does something a yawn can't. It signals all at once to everyone present: we are safe here, we are aligned, we are the same group. This is where laughter starts doing something genuinely strange. It becomes a test. Provine's mole and sidewalk recordings revealed a consistent asymmetry. The person speaking laughed more often than the person listening. That's the opposite of what you'd expect if laughter were purely a response to humor delivered by someone else. Instead, Provine argued that laughter functions as an invitation. When you laugh while speaking, you're not just reacting, you're extending a signal that says, "I trust you, join me here." And how the listener responds tells you something. If they laugh back, the bond strengthens. If they don't, you've just learned in under a second that something is off. This is precisely why forced laughter feels so unsettling. Your brain has spent millions of years calibrating what genuine social bonding laughter sounds like: the rhythm, the breath pattern, the involuntary quality of it. When someone fakes it, something in your threat detection system flags the mismatch immediately, even if you can't consciously say why. There's a physiological layer to all of this too, and it might be the most telling piece. Genuine laughter isn't something you can fully fake because it isn't voluntary in the way speech is. It originates in older regions of the brain, structures shared with animals that have no language at all, rather than the language centers that evolved far more recently. This is why people with certain neurological conditions can lose the ability to speak while retaining the ability to laugh normally, and why stroke patients who can no longer form words can still laugh at something genuinely funny. Laughter runs on older wiring. It survives damage that wipes out language because it was never dependent on language to begin with. Which brings us to the question sitting underneath all of this. If laughter evolved millions of years before speech to manage physical play and signal safety among apes who couldn't talk to each other, why does it still run the show today? In a species that eventually invented one of the most sophisticated communication systems on the planet, the likely answer is that language never replaced laughter's job, because language can't do what laughter does. Words can be planned, edited, rehearsed, and faked with relative ease. A skilled liar can construct a false sentence with almost no physiological tell. But laughter, real laughter, is much harder to counterfeit convincingly because it doesn't route through the parts of your brain responsible for deliberate performance. It leaks out from somewhere underneath conscious control. And that's exactly what makes it useful. In a species capable of lying fluently with words, you needed a channel that stayed harder to fake. A channel that could still tell you, reliably, who was actually safe to be around. So every time you laugh at something that wasn't really a joke, every time a room fills with laughter after someone says something perfectly ordinary, you're not witnessing a glitch in human communication. You're watching a 10-million-year-old survival system still doing its original job, running silently under every conversation you have, checking in real time who around you can you trusted. You think you're laughing at what someone said. Most of the time, you're actually laughing at what you've just decided about them.